Okay, well, hi everyone. I'll give a few seconds just for all the attendees to join the Zoom room. In the meantime, I would like to just say hello to everyone joining us from the US, Hungary, Israel, and Palestine, and from all over the world. Welcome to the latest in Partners for Progressive Israel's webinar series, Conversations with Israel and Palestine. My name is Aiki Salinas. I'm Partners' new executive director, and I have the honor of presenting this webinar today. Before I hand it over to today's discussion moderator, Rabbi Andrea London, let me note that Partners for Progressive Israel is an American not-for-profit dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, which requires an end to Israel's occupation and a recognition of the right to national self-determination of both peoples in the land. Partners supports Israelis working to ensure social justice, Jewish-Arab partnership, and equal rights for all of Israel's inhabitants. Through our programming, we attempt to deepen American understandings of the complexities surrounding Israel and Palestine so that they can better advocate for a progressive future for all the inhabitants of the region. Partners is glad to be bringing you this webinar for free. If you appreciate it and want more programming like this, please visit progressiveisrael.org and make a contribution today. As well, I'd like to take advantage of the moment and just announce that next week we will be having another webinar on malign neglect, how Israel's government is fostering violence and crime in the Arab community and why, which will be co-sponsored with the Abraham Initiatives. Please keep an eye out in your email inboxes for a formal announcement later today. One note about the chat and the Q&A. The chat is open for conversation amongst the audience, but we're only going to be answering questions shared via the Q&A function. We noticed other people couldn't really find the button, so in case you don't see it below, if you click on More, the three ellipses, you should be able to see a Q&A button there. Any question there has a chance of being addressed. With that said, today I'd like to introduce our great panel of expert speakers. Starting off, we have György Vári, a literary historian, journalist, and the leader of Hungary's Jewish progressive community. György received his degree from the University of Pécs, where he researched Kertész Imre, the first Hungarian author to receive a Nobel Prize. Later on, György began his career as a journalist before transitioning to Jewish and religious work, working for the Hungarian Jewish Federation and in the local Jewish Museum. More recently, György became a progressive rabbi, and last year he began to teach as a lecturer in the Jewish Theological Seminary in Budapest. We also have Bulcsú Hunyadi as the head of programs and head of radicalization and extremism at Political Capital, a policy research and consulting institute in Hungary. His core research interests focus on far-right actors, tactics, narratives, and networks, as well as international illiberal authoritarian networking and influence building. He has also been involved in research in the illiberal transformation of the Hungarian political system, Russian influence, disinformation, and Hungarian domestic politics. He has led and participated in many of Political Capital's research projects and is the author or co-author of numerous studies and articles. He is also a regular feature on national and international media. He has worked with Political Capital since 2007 and studied history, sociology, and international relations. We also have Dani Filc, a professor in the Department of Politics and Government and a member of the Health, Humanism, and Society Center at the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. He finished medical school at the University of Buenos Aires and has a PhD from the Kahn Institute for the History and Philosophy of Science and Ideas from Tel Aviv University. His research interests include health policy, the right to health, Israeli politics and society, and populism in Israel and around the world. He is also a senior research fellow at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute. Finally, moderating this event is Rabbi Andrea London, a nationally recognized Jewish leader who served at Beth Emet Synagogue starting in 2000 and was named the congregation's senior rabbi in July 2010. She is now Rabbi Emerita at Beth Emet. Rabbi London is deeply engaged in all aspects of congregational life, including worship, life cycle events, counseling and support, adult education, youth education and programming, social action, and interfaith relations. She strives to teach and encourage individuals and communities through contemplative, social, and spiritually based actions. Rabbi London is a board member of Partners for Progressive Israel and co-chairs the J Street Rabbinic and Cantorial Cabinet. She has been involved in peace and justice activism in Israel-Palestine for more than 30 years and lived in Israel for 3 of those. Please, Rabbi Andrea, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ike, and to our wonderful panelists and a very timely discussion. As we know, the Israeli election will be held October 27th, and a lot of people are wondering the possibility of change after this election or leading up to the election too. And so we wanted to look at the model of how Hungary has been able to defeat authoritarianism at the ballot box. And so we're really delighted to first invite our Hungarian guest to speak about how that was done, and since the election, how you are grappling with, I would probably say, the remnants still of authoritarianism in Hungary and what the current challenges still are, and perhaps any lessons that you might have to teach the Israeli public who's trying to defeat Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and the rest of the authoritarian crowd there. So, Bulcsú, I'm going to start with you. And then also, when we get to you, Dr. György Vári, it's nice to have another colleague here, and you've had an interesting background to come to the rabbinate. Perhaps also you can add how you think that the religious community can have an impact on defeating authoritarianism. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the introduction, Ike and Rabbi Andrea. Yes, so I think I would provide a kind of a brief introduction of not exactly what has happened in Hungary, much more to what were the reasons for what happened in Hungary in April. You might know that we had a historic election on April the 12th in Hungary, which ended a 16 years of Viktor Orbán's rule. Viktor Orbán was the prime minister of Hungary for 16 years, from 2010 until 2026, leading his ruling Fidesz party. And we had this, I think it was a very unexpected, or to many, I think, an unexpected result, because it was not just, I think, a simple win or a victory of an opposition party. It was a landslide victory of an opposition party, which was, I think, very unexpected after 16 years of an increasingly authoritarian rule of Viktor Orbán. So the opposition party, which is called, and which is now the ruling party, the party is called TISA. This party received almost 56% of domestic vote in the election in Hungary. So almost 2/3 of the votes went to the opposition party, which resulted in a parliamentary majority of over 70%. So the current ruling party has a 2/3 majority in the Hungarian parliament, which is a constitutional majority, allowing the current government and the ruling party to completely rewrite the Hungarian political system and to end the authoritarian system of the previous government, the previous Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. So I will try to be brief to paint a picture of what were the main reasons, in my opinion, for the win, for the victory of the opposition party. I need to say at the very beginning that I think it was a fortunate combination of unique factors that allowed or enabled the opposition party to win. I'm always very cautious when it comes to the question what other actors, other countries can learn from any country's examples or any particular party's examples in other countries, because I deeply think that political developments are mostly unique to the national context. Even though, of course, there are certainly kind of international developments or international um, examples that might be useful. But I think the Hungarian case was a very unique case, which does not mean that there aren't certain factors that might be helpful for other actors, but definitely it was a fortunate and unique combination of different factors that led to the victory of the opposition party. Probably the most important factor was the devastating state of the Hungarian economy and the Hungarian public services. We had years of stagnation in Hungary. We had the highest inflation in the European Union. So the living costs skyrocketed in the years before the elections. And I think this was the situation that kind of paved the way or set the stage for the election. So there was an increasing social dissatisfaction in the country well before the opposition, this new opposition party, which is now the ruling party, emerged on the political scene. Also, we had a lot of different scandals that shook the government, the Fidesz government back at that time. Also, many of these scandals actually happened before the emergence of the opposition TISA party. There were different scandals, including also corruption scandals, but I think much more important were scandals that destroyed the government's credibility in its core ideological areas. Like, for instance, protecting children was one of the key messages or the key agenda points of the previous Hungarian government, and there were scandals that highlighted the devastated situation of the childcare system in Hungary, and also the systemic abuse of power also related to the child protection system. That was one example, but there were also other scandals. I won't go into details now, but the bottom line here is that there were serious scandals that destroyed the government's credibility. And that was the time when the opposition challenger, Péter Magyar, who is currently the prime minister, and his new TISA party emerged on the scene. So Péter Magyar, who became the main challenger to Viktor Orbán, the previous prime minister, he emerged on the political scene at the right time. And also he was equipped with skills that were needed to channel social dissatisfaction against the government. So he was a former regime insider. So he used to be part of the regime. He used to be part of the Fidesz ecosystem. So he very well knew the system from within. He knew how the system worked. He also kind of knew what kind of attacks he will be facing. So he also knew how to cope with these attacks. And also he ran a campaign, a very populistic campaign against also the very populistic campaign of the government. So there were kind of two populistic campaigns competing with each other. The difference was that the opposition party's campaign was focusing on people's everyday issues and everyday problems, like social problems, economic problems, while the government's populism were concentrating on scapegoats, on symbolic threats to the nation or alleged threats to the nation. So there was a very huge difference or a very huge gap between the government's campaign and the reality that people were perceiving. And I think this was also a very important factor. And also, and this is my second last point, which enabled the opposition party to win, was civic courage of the Hungarian people. So there was civic opposition to some government policies, irrespective of the opposition party. So these civic opposition emerged actually unrelated to the opposition party. One of the cases of civic opposition was the opposition to the Pride ban. You might have heard that the Hungarian government tried to ban the Pride march in Hungary in summer 2025, and there was a genuine civic opposition to this ban, and we had the biggest ever Pride march in Budapest in opposition to the government's efforts to ban this Pride. So while there was an opposition party, also there was an increasing social opposition to government's policies. And my last point, and I will finish here, was actually the result of all the factors that I mentioned already, was that the disinformation that previously worked for 16 years for the government failed to work at this time in this election campaign. And the reason for this, I think, was that many people, what I said, many people were dissatisfied with the government because of economic problems. And also, I think many people were just tired of the 16 years of the Orbán government. But also because there was this increasing gap between reality that people were actually experiencing in their everyday lives and the government's propaganda that the government's propaganda machinery tried to sell to the people. They tried to blame external actors for all the problems, and I think people were fed up with this propaganda, didn't buy this anymore. And I will stop here.
Thank you. That was a wonderful overview. I really appreciate that. Rabbi, Dr. György, what do you have to say to any responses to what Bulcsú put out for us? Any additions that you would like to make in terms of roles of perhaps civic opposition, the religious community?
No, it was really nice. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay. No.
I didn't want to. Okay. So I think that it was really a very good summary, and I want to emphasize one element. It is the Pride March, to what Bulcsú referred to. It is crucially important. I don't know how important a factor it is concerning the radical changes, but I'm sure that the only thing we have to study, basically, not only the Israelis, but all of us among us, is to build society. It is crucially important. Let's say in Israel, as you know far much better than me, society is divided into large groups that are separated, totally separated from each other. The Arab population and the Jewish population. Within the Jewish population, even today, it matters if you are from a Mizrahi background or from an Ashkenazi background, and so on, like ultra-Orthodox Haredim and Datim and the Chiloni public, the secular sector of the Israeli society, and so on. And the main problem that between these huge social groups, there is basically no interaction or discussion whatsoever. And it is worse and worse and worse, as far as I can understand from here in Israel. And there are similarities here in Hungary. This is also an extremely divided society, though we don't really have these kinds of social groups. And it is also a problem. The ways of life in Hungary are very similar to each other. There are naturally social layers. There are deep, deep poverty here in Hungary. Many in the country, mainly in the Hungarian countryside, not exclusively. Deep poverty is a great problem, a huge one, and hopelessness. But the middle class way of life is very similar. And unfortunately, the continuity of our cultural practices and ways of life, it disappeared, because partly or mainly because of the terrible historic catastrophes that took place during the previous century, the Second World War, let's say, and the Holocaust. For example, in the Jewish community, I would say 98% of those who consider themselves Jews in Hungary. It's really not easy to say who is Jewish and who is not. But let's say there are at least tens of thousands of people here in Hungary who would say, if you ask them, that in some aspect they somehow consider themselves Jewish or Jewish and Hungarian, Jewish and something else, or at least partly Jewish. It has a role in their life that they are somehow, according to their that's how they describe themselves, that they are somehow Jewish. And most of them, I would say the vast majority, more than 90% of them, they are not really connected to any kind of Jewish community, Jewish practice. They are not part of any layer of Jewish life here in Hungary. They know nothing about their heritage. They somehow feel, they mainly feel that they are victims of anti-Semitic expressions and emotions. And in this sense, they consider themselves Jewish, but it doesn't really mean anything else. For them, it's not even as a cultural tradition. I don't speak necessarily about religious practice or belief. We don't have any more distinct traditions as Jews. It's quite the same. Many or most of the quite huge gypsy society here in Hungary, we speak about hundreds of thousands of people, and there are terrible integrational problems and less efforts. And they themselves, like the vast majority of them, they don't understand their traditional languages, Lovari and so on. And we can continue it with the German ethnic group and so on and so on and so on. So ethnic traditions disappeared basically, and cultural traditions disappeared, partly of all kinds of ethnic cleansings in the last century. Not only the Jews were the victims of, I mean, naturally, the Holocaust is something different from every other ethnic cleansing, as we all know it. But there are other ethnic cleansings. For example, like Germans were expelled basically from Hungary after the Second World War, many of them. And this expulsion was also, concerning its logic, totally Nazi. You are German, we don't care what did you actually do during the Holocaust, if you tried to save Jews, if you were a bystander, if you were against Hitler or for Hitler. No one cares. You were German and it's enough, so you have to leave because of what happened and caused, let's say, by the Reich in those times. So ethnic and cultural traditions disappeared from Hungary, and it means that ethnic and cultural groups that can build a society together, they don't have their own traditions. They don't remember their own traditions anymore. And I think that without a society that can be divided into meaningful little groups and not subgroups and not huge groups that the situation is in Israel, it is always easier to convince big parts of the society for a wannabe authoritarian leader that our problems are the same, the solutions are the same, the solutions are very simple. And if you trust me and vote me, it can unite you, because they simply, like all of us Hungarians, we, like you and like everybody else, we want to belong simply. We all know how strong the sense of belonging in every human being. And this is, I think, extremely important. Like many hundreds of thousands or even millions, even today, can feel that they belong to Orbán Viktor. When you hear those who vote for Orbán Viktor even today and consider him a hero, and it is also more than 1 million Hungarian, they speak about him as, I don't know, a head of a family, very familiar. It is very personal for them. They are very grateful for him because he gave them the sense of belonging, basically. They consider it their personal friends, partly because we Hungarians, are extremely lonely, and we feel that we are alone and abandoned by the huge powers, by Western Europe, United States, and so on. That's why it was surprisingly easy the anti-Western propaganda, the anti-EU propaganda to work, because that's how we feel, abandoned by everyone. It is a little nation like the Jewish one, who feels abandoned by those who really matter. And the sense of belonging and the loneliness are, I think, crucial factors. And I'm not sure that it is over. I don't think that Mr. Orbán himself can come back, or who knows, maybe he can, but probably not. But there will be someone else. There is always someone else. The problem is never like Mr. Netanyahu or Mr. Trump or Mr. Orbán. The problem is like how to say, the situation in the society. How can authoritarian like ideas be easily attractive? Doesn't matter who the one is who express them. And I think that if we cannot solve these like underlying problems in Hungarian society, then we will always, like, it will again and again produce another talented politician who will use this language that is extremely familiar to all of us. Orbán Viktor sounded simply familiar for all of us, even for those who would never vote to him. Let's say I personally felt many times when I was handled in like international Jewish conferences as someone who naturally doesn't know anything about the world because he's from Eastern Europe. Eastern Europeans are far behind us. We can be sure that they don't know real English. They don't read newspapers, and we have to be very kind with them. They are our friends and like sisters and brothers, but we have to feel pity somehow how like behind they are if we compare them with ourselves. And when I experience that they feel pity even before asking what's your name, I became like from time to time extremely angry, and I felt personally deep in my heart that maybe somehow Orman Victor is right. And it's simply a feeling, and I always knew that he's not. And I was, as a journalist, always like very clearly against what he tried to do. And from time to time, even me deep in my heart felt that yes, we are abandoned, we are treated badly, no one like treats us like as equals, and so on and so on and so on. And it always works. So we have to work with ourselves, we have to work with our environment, and it is also important that this nation, and it will be maybe familiar for all of you too. This nation always feels that literally no one understands us. I mean, the Hungarian language is a language that has basically no relatives in the world except Finnish and Estonian people who are not big nations either. And we don't understand each other anyway. So technically, these languages are related. Historically, they are related, but it doesn't mean that we actually understand each other. We don't. And just because of this experience that our language is not understood by anyone, we are a tiny little nation with a language that separates us from everyone. And for example, the Slavs around us, they do understand each other. At least we think that they do understand each other. They don't always understand each other. Actually, it is also a very important component and can explain the feeling that no one cares about us, everyone hates us, and so on and so on. And we are simply afraid of the world. It's too big. And we experienced many times that anyone can conquer Hungary, whoever wants. We are afraid, quite understandably, from the Russians. We are afraid, quite understandably, from the Germans. It's quite same in the whole, like Central Europe. Quite same with like Polish people. But still, Poland is a huge nation of almost 40 million people. You cannot compare Hungary even to Poland when you want to understand who we are. And I think it is also important
Rabbi?
to think of it. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I just want to make sure that we leave enough time for Dani
Yes.
to
Sorry,
speak, and
sorry,
then
sorry.
also
Yeah.
for people to ask questions as well. So you really spoke about Bulcsú really gave us the overview of people not buying into Orbán's propaganda anymore. This very symbolic event that happened with the Pride March last year, that the new prime minister coming from within the party and understanding that function. And somehow 56% is what you said of the population voted him out. 70% now of parliament is that opposition party. So it's really been quite something. And yet, György, you were talking about the fact that Hungary feels very isolated, very alone, that maybe this is only for a period of time, and that this populism of Orbán is likely to come back because of people's fondness for him and feeling like he helped them belong and have an identity as Hungarians. Dani, there's a lot of things here that probably feel similar to what's happening in Israel or not. And so just want to get your sense, when György was talking about the isolation of Hungary and the language and feeling that the world is against you. I thought, wow, there's certainly something that Israelis, often feel. Do you think there's things from the Hungarian example, though, that could be that the opposition in Israel could learn from and could possibly win in the election coming up?
I think that the most important.
You're very quiet.
Sorry,
There we go.
you hear me?
Do you have more volume?
I'm at the maximum volume.
There we go. Now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that the most important lesson is the fact that history is not deterministic, and that even very strong leaders eventually, if there is a political will and a political organization and civil society organization, those leaders can be defeated. I think that's the main lesson we can learn. There was a tendency in Israel to present the Hungarian case as the victory of authoritarianism over democracy, and a victory that was a kind of dead end. There is no coming back from there. I think that the results of the last election show that this is not so, and in that sense, there is also a tendency among the Israeli public to look at Netanyahu as a kind of wizard that is able to always win. And I think that in that sense, the Hungarian case, now there are a lot of differences for sure. Another important point that I think we have in common is the role of civil society. Bulcsú has mentioned the important role of civil society as opposition, and this is so in the Israeli case since January 2023, when the Minister of Justice announced the changes in the relationship between the judiciary power on the one side and the parliamentary and the executive on the other hand. There were significant demonstrations every Saturday. Those demonstrations even continue after the October 7th attack and during the Gaza war, focusing at the beginning on bringing back the hostages, and as the war evolved, also linking between the need to stop the war and even to refuse Netanyahu's war and bringing back the hostages. So we have a very, very mobilized civil society in that sense. I personally think that I don't know whether we'll have the kind of landslide that Bulcsú mentioned, and we have also a much more proportional representative system. So and Netanyahu, during the last decade and a half, he has managed to build a very, very strong alliance with the Haredim and with the ultra-Orthodox Jews. And in that sense, he has built an alliance that in class terms is built on the Jewish lower classes, which most of them vote for Haredim parties, and the middle and lower middle class that has underwent mobility mostly during the period 2009 and 2019. And this has been enough to maintain him in power for more than a decade. I think that this is coming to an end. polls a lot. Often polls are wrong, but there is a consistency in the results of the polls, but also there is some kind of consistent polling, not only who will you vote for, but also polling issues. And in the main issues that concern the Israeli public, the government policies are clearly in a minority. So I think my view is that Netanyahu will lose the coming elections. That doesn't mean that we have a good government. It will be the lesser evil in a way. Yes, we have now a government that has by three or four brands of radical right wing, a clerical fascism as Ben-Gvir and his party, radical right populism, Likud, and religious fundamentalism, Smotrich and his party. And there is also a powerful intellectual current which could be called nationalist conservatism. So in that sense, the next government will be probably a right-wing government, but not a radical right-wing government. But we have last week, for example, Gadi Eisenkot, that probably will be Israel's next prime minister, said there won't be any Palestinian state during my government, with the next government that I will head. And that means that, there are three possibilities in Israel. One possibility is going to ending the occupation and peace that with a Palestinian state side by side with Israel as two-state solution or in a confederation. That's one possibility. The other possibility is what this government is trying to do in the last couple of years. It's what Smotrich called Tochnit HaAchraa, or the determination program, which is bringing to the expelling most of the Palestinians, not only from the Gaza Strip, but also from the West Bank. And the third alternative that it seems that it will be Eisenkot's and the next government program is to try to manage the conflict, which was the policy that Netanyahu adopted before 2023. So unfortunately, in that sense, the next government will not bring a real new view or new policies. But I think there will be two important things, and I'm not saying, and I'm very, very far from claiming that the opposition and the government are the same. No, there are two clear differences. The one is that, well, this government is a radical right government with a very, very fascist wing. The next government will be maybe center and right wing, but not radical right wing. And the second point is that, and in that sense, I may disagree a little bit with Rabbi Vári, in the sense that the fact that Netanyahu will be defeated and he won't be already more a part of Israeli politics will allow for an opening of Israeli politics, which has been organized during the last 15 years only in terms of pro-Netanyahu, anti-Netanyahu, and that will at least open the possibility to discuss policies instead of discussing persons. So a less personalized politics will open the possibility of putting forward progressive politics, both in terms of the conflict, the occupation, and also in terms of the socioeconomic aspects that are also important. And once again, if the opposition wins, or when the opposition wins, it will not bring very, very positive elements in terms of socioeconomic policies.
Thank you. So, Bulcsú, I was really intrigued by the fact that 70% of the parliament now is the opposition party, and that you were mentioning that real change could be made within Hungary. I want you to speak a little bit about what that change is. And I think that one of my concerns, Dani, is that even if Eisenkot wins as prime minister and there's not the center-right government, that the opportunity for real change in Israel is going to be quite slight, though with just a little change. And so I'm wondering, Bulcsú, what kind of change you've really seen in Hungary, and Dani, what kind of change you really think could be seen even if Netanyahu and the far right is defeated in Israel? What's realistic, even if there's a change in the government? But certainly 70% of the parliament, Knesset, will not be, anti-Netanyahu bloc, right? Well, Bulcsú, I wanted to know what you can share with us about change that's happened within Hungary since April.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sorry for my image being frozen. I don't know what happened, but I hope that my Zoom will not crash this time. What's interesting is that what I said, that TISA won this election with 56% of the domestic votes. And since the election, since April, or after the election, within a couple of weeks, actually, TISA's support has even further increased. So currently, the support for TISA, or the preference for TISA, is at around, I think, 70% of the population. So if elections were held on this Sunday in Hungary, TISA got even a bigger majority in the Hungarian parliament, which is incredible and which is unprecedented in Hungary, and I think in most democratic countries. It doesn't really happen very often that in a pluralistic democratic society, one party would get such an enormous proportion of the votes. And I think the reason for that is that after the fall of Viktor Orbán and his regime, I think there was kind of an awakening in society. So also on election day, after the results were announced, there was a kind of a mass festival happening on the streets of Budapest. People were really kind of floating to the streets and chanting and singing and were really happy about the election. And I think it really showed how distressed many people in Hungary became during the 16 years of the Orbán regime. And that one effective tool of the Orbán government was actually to make society apolitical. So, of course, they vote for the votes of many people, but basically vote for the votes of the core electorate of the Fidesz party, and the rest of the society they wanted to alienate from politics. So they kind of wanted, I think, people not to engage with politics and with public life issues in Hungary. And that has changed already during the campaign, so before the election. And that was, I think, a result of what I said, of the different scandals, of the economic situation and social situation in Hungary, but also that was a result or the effect of a new opposition party emerging that was able to give people hope that a change is possible in the election, and that created a kind of a snowball effect in Hungary. So more and more people believe that a change is possible, which also increased social opposition. So more and more people came forward, for instance, before the election, and spoke about their personal experience of abuse of power Public servants, for instance, came forward during the campaign and told stories what happened in ministries or in different government agencies, how corruption and how the abuse of power, practically worked on the everyday in the everyday life of public servants. So that was, I think, after the election, there was really a huge relief and a huge awakening within society. And also, one of the first steps the new government wanted to do is to cut funding of the propaganda machinery of the previous government, to reintroduce an independent public media, for instance, or re-establish an independent public media in Hungary, to cut disinformation and to allow people to get access to real and objective information. And I think this again reinforced this awakening in society. And I think what I haven't spoken about yet, but I think which was a very important factor, was the political work that the current Prime Minister Péter Magyar invested during the campaign. He literally toured the country for 2.5 years. So he visited, according to his own kind of estimation, he visited 700 localities, which is roughly more than 1/5 or over 20% of all the localities in the country. So he really kind of visited every corner of the country during these 2.5 years, since after he emerged on the political scene. And also what I mentioned already, but I wanted to emphasize now again, that his campaign was focusing on people's everyday and real problems and concerns, whereas the government focused on symbolic culture war issues and artificially invented or exaggerated enemies and scapegoats. And I think this, that was a very clear difference between these two campaigns, and I think that also contributed to people, to people's awakening, that they didn't buy the propaganda anymore.
Thank you. Dani, I want to respond, but also there's some questions that came up here, which I would like to add. Number one, is Eisenkot speaking against a Palestinian state in order to get elected, but might that change after he were to be elected? And do you think that Channel 14, Bibi's public television or propaganda machine, we could call it, will be closed or returned to the public? So just a couple of things for questions for you, Dani.
Okay, so first, concerning realistic change. I think that realistic change would mean, on the one hand, freeing the police from Ben-Gvir's domination. That would mean that the police could really work against radical right-wing thugs that are on the verge of violence. That would be one issue that you can expect some change. I think that you can expect some kind of change both in the way that the IDF and the police address the violence of the settlers in the West Bank. I think that the idea of managing the conflict, what was the policy which was common both for the Lapid-Bennett government and Netanyahu's government previous to October 7, 2023, that policy requires the repression of the settlers' violence. So that you could expect realistically some change. Another area that could expect some change is the way to cope with the extreme violence within the Palestinian Arab-Israeli society, which was in many ways, it was more than indifference from the police and the state. It was an indifference in many ways invested in maintaining that kind of violence. So those are three areas where you could expect changes, and also in the way I would expect a kind of more technical management of the state, in a way depoliticize the state, give more place to the civil service. And once again, I'm not saying that that is always good. I think that the liberal illusion about the neutrality of the state is an illusion. But the way in which this government has used state institutions in a way which is so, let's say, so blunt, that would you could expect realistically that would change. So those are some changes that could occur. Another change that could occur, I'm not sure about it, that is quite problematic, is a change in the alliances between the alliance between Haredim and the Likud. And if there was a change, then the relationship between the government, the next government and the next opposition would change significantly. Now, concerning whether Eisenkot opposes a Palestinian state in order to get elected, or it's part of his policy, I don't know him at all, so I can't enter his way of thinking. I can say that there is a dialectic between what political leadership says and what people believes and thinks. And if what the Israeli public is hearing from almost all the political spectrum is that there is no place for a Palestinian state, that eventually influences what people think about a Palestinian state. Making a Palestinian state and peace part of the political possibilities, of the political openings, is something that the opposition should do, and they are not doing, except of Mansour Abbas, who spoke about that, Kadash, who has spoken about that for many years. Makom Lekulanu, a place for all, is also speaking clearly about that. And within the Democratic Party, there are some contradictions. Lately, Naama Lazimi, who is not on the right wing of the Democratic Party, has also expressed herself against, not against the Palestinian state, but saying that that won't be an issue for the next government. So I think that maybe, the geopolitical situation will bring changes in Eisenkot's position, and maybe he already thinks that the Palestinian state is a possibility, but he wants to be elected. But it's important to express, to say those things publicly, because they influence public opinion. Public opinion is influenced by the voices of political leaders. And about
Channel 14.
Channel 14,
Yeah.
I don't think it will be closed. I think that the next government could within legality stop most of the privileges, not so legal privileges, that the current government have given to Channel 14, and in that way diminish its power and its influence. But I don't think somebody will decide to utterly close it. But probably much more regulation about the enormous amount of fake news that they are used to voice.
Another question here. Was Hungarian public at any point as right-wing as the Israeli public seems to be? Is there a lesson for the suddenness with which public sentiment can change? So I guess that's a question both for our Hungarian speakers and also for Dani.
Okay, I'm not a political analyst, but seemingly no one wants to say the first word, so I will be the one. I think that you cannot compare the mood of the Hungarian public with the Israeli. I mean, we are not in a war state. The existence of Hungary, thanks to God, is not threatened by anyone. There is no, and it's quite the same to the Palestinian public too. We, thanks to God, we didn't see war. I don't know, maybe 1956 was the last scene when there was actually a siege in the capital city in Budapest. So I think that it is rather fear in the Israeli and the Palestinian public and hatred toward each other because of the experiences they went through. So you cannot compare it with Hungary. Hungarians' preferences are, thanks to God, because I'm not threatened by anyone, are really different. I don't really know the attitudes. I'm not a sociologist either, but I think that you cannot compare the mood of the two publics. And I think that the Hungarian public's mood is, yes, they are very traditional. No one really likes change. Not only Hungary, but like whenever change is always hard. You have to adopt and so on and so on. And we are very traditional, this society, because we experienced that change is always challenge, if not worse. So in this sense, it is a very conservative society. And Bulcsú knows much more about it. But the parties that called themselves left-wing in Hungary, they proved many, many times after the collapse of the so-called socialist system, and they were somehow connected to the previous system. The party itself has a structure, and the persons who represented these policies, they proved many times that there is no reason to trust them. So probably once a Hungarian left-wing party will be rebuilt by, we don't know yet by whom, and also left-wing social movements will appear. They already appeared. Mainly intellectuals are the ones, like university students, who are active in it. Maybe once it will reach working class people, and these social movements will rebuild a left-wing party, because income inequalities here in Hungary are totally unacceptable, beyond unacceptable, outrageous. And so a real left-wing party is more than needed here. And we don't have even something that can be compared to the Democrats, let's say, or Yair Golan's party. And it will once probably appear again. We will see, but these are, I mean, in this sense, the Israeli public and the Hungarian public are very different from each other.
I think that the Israeli public is less right-wing than its political leadership. In 2024, during the war, and several months after after October 7th, a poll by Accord, which is one of the most serious research institutes concerning public opinion, showed that some 60% of the public consider that there was a need of a political solution and not a military one, or not only a military one. So, and this was clearly not reflected in the voices of the political leadership of the members of parliament. So it's true that the Israeli public went to the right, especially after October 7th, but it's still less right-wing than its political that the political leadership. Even if you see what Likud voters the opinions of Likud voters about the conflict, they are much more moderate than what the MKs, that the members of the Knesset hear and express in the media and in the social media and in the Knesset.
Thank you. Thank you for a very thoughtful and productive conversation today. And we hope and pray that there will continue to be positive change in Hungary, and that Israel will also see a change in this next government, and that some of the changes, Dani, that you spoke about, we'll see after the election, and anything that we can do to be helpful as we move towards October 27th. Know here at Partners for Progressive Israel that we are with you.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to thank Rabbi Andrea, as well as Bulcsú, György, and Dani, and to everyone who joined us. I really hope you enjoyed this webinar. An additional reminder, next week we are going to have another webinar, same time, just 1 week from now. The topic is going to be on malign neglect, how Israel's government is fostering violence and crime in the Arab community and why. The link has already been shared in this chat, but also please keep an eye out for your email. This event will be co-sponsored with the Abraham Initiatives. One last thing, while today's program has been free, generous contributions are what enable PPI to deliver these kinds of events at this level of quality. So if you would love to, we would really appreciate visiting progressiveisrael.org. That way you can also check out our upcoming programming and potentially make a donation. Thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.